The Lord be with you. This weekend we mark the fifth Sunday of Lent. In the Gospel of John, we hear the story of the raising of Lazarus. Listen to the story. The sisters of Lazarus sent a message to Jesus. "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard this, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Mary and Martha and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus was already in the tomb for 4 days. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." Jesus was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. And so the people said, "See how he loved him." But others of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." The Gospel of the Lord. Grieving, bewildered, angry with Jesus. This is the scene in Bethany when Jesus arrives. In the midst of our suffering, it's not unusual to have similar experiences, feelings much like those that Jesus encountered, and people asking the question, where is God in all of this? Jesus comes to them, but not as they expected, and speaks to them in a way they did not imagine. One night, many years ago, a parishioner came to me after Mass and said, I thought of taking my life, but instead I came here. When I heard her story, I understood why she was in such psychological pain, with little to hold on to. All she really had was her faith. Like Martha and Mary, we encounter Jesus in a way that challenges us to go beyond conventional thinking. We are forced to deal with paradox. Those who die will live, and those who live will never die. Faith leads to expanded thinking. When the stone was rolled away from Lazarus' tomb, the crowd wavered between faith and skepticism. Our society tends to see religious faith as an outlier or a set of beliefs outside the rational system of thinking. But for people of faith, like Martha and Mary, faith in Jesus is not just a set of religious ideas, but first of all, a relationship with the God who loves us, with the Christ who calls us, and with the Spirit who enlivens us. That's why I feel so strongly about adult spiritual growth. Catholics should be challenged to go beyond conventional thinking, to struggle with paradox, and to experience the love of God in a way that transforms lives. In the unbinding and freeing of Lazarus, we recognize clearly our role as community of faith to reach out to those whom God calls forth. Those struggling with addiction, the 1% of the world's wealthiest who control 50% of the world's resources. The list goes on and on. But in this time of COVID-19, I wonder if Jesus is asking us to unbind those who are lonely in their isolation, keeping a close eye on those who might be falling into depression, helping in the outreach of Windermere United Church or our own parish, St. Vincent de Paul Ministry, empathizing with those who are unduly worried, being in solidarity with families who suddenly find an extra financial weight placed on their shoulders. In the reading from the book of the prophet Ezekiel today, God says, I am going to take you from your graves. I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live. May the peace and grace of God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ be with you during this coming week.